So we're going to cover why the lit review, what is the lit review. I'll talk about getting started. Building the comprehensive review is usually what we're worried about in most of these sessions. We'll talk about successful research strategies and techniques. I'm going to demonstrate that as though I'm walking through some of the processes that you'll be dealing with. I'll talk about keeping track of sources and searches and ways for you to save time along the way. I'm going to mention things that will save you some time and energy and might even be more efficient than if you did it on your own. We'll talk about how to keep up with the literature in your field after your initial searching, so you're not going back and doing it. And we'll also talk about briefly capitalizing on FIU library resources and services, because although you'll be using a lot of them, there are others that people don't always use. So I want to make sure to get back to that before we say goodbye to each other today. You know, when a person is doing a lit review, there's an assumption that you're going to develop the knowledge of the topic you're working on, but there are other skills that you're developing along the way. Your information-seeking abilities are tested and hopefully improved as you scan the literature, and your critical appraisal abilities are also key to making good decisions and analyzing what you're finding along the way. So it's not only knowledge of a subject, it's learning different types of methods along the way and getting better at it. And I think that most students, as they do more and more research, they do get better at it. It's something that you have to kind of exercise that muscle for it to work. Now, literature review does some important things. It's supposed to be organized around and directly relating to the thesis or research question. So that, like most of the papers you've written, is the same. You still have this research question that is the overarching topic. But there'll be several different things about it. You're going to synthesize the results into a summary of what is and is not known. You're going to identify areas of controversy in the literature and formulate questions that need further research. And I'm going to talk about these again as we go along. There are different formats of lit reviews. We see that there are, they can be part of a larger work, they can be part of a smaller, but a standalone. So for example, a more selective lit review could be the intro to a journal article, whereas part of a larger work would be part of a thesis or a dissertation. The other side of the coin is it could be a standalone. It could be just a selective work for a course assignment, and the other side of the coin is a review article. So there are all types of lit reviews that you could be doing. And one of the pieces that sometimes gets confused is that the words literature review could be both a process and a product. So we're talking a lot today about the process of getting that product done. So in terms of the process, it's about reviewing the literature and the steps. I'm going to go through them in a little more detail in a few minutes. Selecting the topic, searching for the information, evaluating and managing the search results, organizing and synthesizing, and writing an assessment of the literature. So there's this process that you walk through. When we talk about the product, which is similar to, looks at some of the things that were on that slide earlier, it could be an unpublished review for an assignment or project. Is anyone in this room working on one of those? How about a part of a published article? In the introduction or lit review section, I see heads shaking. Published review article, and last but not least, in preparation for a part of a thesis or a dissertation. Do we have thesis, dissertation? Okay, so knowing that is helpful to me and to you. So I'm going to be talking a lot. I'm going to ask if someone will start us out by reading this definition for process. Anyone willing? I know you're able.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. It's a systematic, explicit, and reproducible method for identifying, evaluating, and synthesizing the existing body of completed and reported work produced by researchers, scholars, and practitioners.
Thank you. And will someone read the product part? Anybody? Yes.
A literature review is a summary and evaluation of the significant research published on a topic, organized in a way that shows the relationship between research studies, as well as the way each has contributed to an understanding of the topic. A secondary source, because it is an overview of existing research on the topic.
So there are two different pieces that we're worrying about in this. Today, again, we're talking mostly about the process to produce that product. Now, it's iterative in that a lot of the process, you may find this happening and not to feel frustrated by it because it's going to improve the final product in the end. But that is, you start out with selecting a topic, and sometimes you start with this initial topic, and I'm going to recommend a broad topic. And then as you start researching, you're searching for the literature, then you're evaluating that literature, and that's when very often you begin to see, oh, I'm not really hitting on what I would prefer, and now I'm thinking this looks better to me, which is good. I mean, it's important to make those decisions earlier on because there is, in my opinion, nothing worse than living with a topic you don't like. You have to get some excitement for it, so finding exactly what aspect of the topic really resonates for you is very important, and that there's material out there to find. So once you've evaluated, very often people end up going right back to the beginning of selecting the topic again, revising that search, searching for the literature, reevaluating the literature. And so, sometimes you get further down and make some decisions and head back up again. And one of the things that's very common is that when you're researching a topic, you have many questions. Yes, you start out with a general question, but there are like all these sub-questions that come up along the way. And so then the way you search for that information is just another search out there into the databases, and you're using different terminology, so you may be picking up on other items. So there can be many versions of this, but it is constantly changing and growing. It's not something that you do once and that's the end of it. I think that's what, for many students is what they would like it to be, but it's very much an iterative process because it keeps refining as you learn more about your topic. So the thing that I think is most difficult part of the lit review, and which sets it apart from most of the research papers you write, is that even though it has this overarching topic, the literature is the subject under discussion, not as much the topic, okay? If it's part of another paper in particular, you're gonna talk about that in the other part, but the lit review is pulling together all the literature, and at that moment, the literature is the subject of discussion. So there, you're summarizing it, you're evaluating it, you're showing relationships between the literature and who's written this and who's written that. So it's a different animal than the usual paper because normally you're just writing about the topic and using the literature to support your thesis and what you're trying to prove. So this is a different thing, and you sort of have to have your head different as you're approaching it. And some of the questions you have to ask, I'm going to give you some questions in a minute that will help you to sort of think differently about this approaching a lit review versus a regular paper. Now, I have just a little piece here of some types of lit reviews, and I also gave you a couple of screens on here. They're all along the wall there. A couple of them here. I don't expect you to read them, but I do want you to think about this when you get an assignment for a lit review. Make sure that the professor gives you some information that you really need to make a decision on how to approach it. Because in different subject areas, different disciplines, and I know that I have a variety here in the room, the way to approach a lit review will vary. And you want to make sure that you're doing it the way you want the professor is asking for it. So be sure to be aware of the type of lit review and what their expectations are for that. Some things, dealing with literature reviews are pretty similar, but not all, and you really need to be aware of that. So I gave you this little rundown, and then there are a couple of nice sheets there that talk even more about the differences between types of lit reviews. Now, I know that this slide, I put it in here because people do ask, even though it is, I think, a little bit of common sense right there. A lot of people will ask me how many items you have to find. And there are so many variables here, so it really depends what the purpose of your research is, obviously what more comprehensive versus more selective, what stage you are in your studies. Obviously the professor and the advisor, they usually will give you a feeling for the minimum versus, they don't usually give you a max. And depending on your subject area, as you do the research, a lot of databases today will include, some of them include how many references are in papers, like whether it's a journal article or a thesis or dissertation. They sometimes will include that, and so you can get a feeling for what people are doing in your field as you're doing the research. But that doesn't mean that you have to do that. One of the things that I think becomes really important is what your topic is. I mean, if there isn't a lot written about your topic, you're not going to find as much as someone else who has written where there's a topic that there's quite a lot written. So I wouldn't get hung up on that. I think that you have advisors and professors you're working with, and if you're having, issues about that and you're worried about it, talk to them. I know that they will give you some perspective on what to expect and not to. These are numbers that I have gotten from reputable sources, so it wasn't like I made it up, but I think that they're very conservative. After the lower division, even honors, I think if it's a regular paper, we're not doing bad. But for the master's and the doctoral, totally depends on your subject area, your discipline. The expectations vary widely. So here's part of the problem formation. So I don't know where you guys are in your lit review process, but if you're at the beginning, I highly recommend that you choose a broader subject at the beginning, because it's better to go out there and look for something. I don't mean a broad subject like science. I mean a broad subject that's a focused broad subject. And because you want to look for something where you're going to see some variance in what people are writing about and what they're talking about. And so I think having something that has subtopics is very helpful and will help you to make some decisions along the way. Don't get too, at the beginning, don't get too focused on checking here and there and there. Choose some preliminary databases, and if you're not sure what those are, I'm going to recommend you see your subject liaison, the librarian who works with your area, to give you some ideas. And I can give you some ideas as well. I mean, I work with every subject area for lots of different things. And also just do some preliminary searches. Don't get focused on, comprehensive search and worrying about that. Don't download 5,000 articles. At the beginning, take a look at those titles. Most databases allow you to click for a little preview, and sometimes they'll give you a nice abstract which helps you to think a little bit about them, the subject headings. And when I get into the databases in a few minutes, I'll show you, what I'm looking at. But I think looking at titles at that beginning stage is what you want to do. Most scholarly titles are quite descriptive. They may not be as descriptive as one might hope, and that's why the abstract is often there. But having the titles to look at, looking at some subject headings of what they're attaching to those articles, will help you to think about your topic. You're not committing yet. You're thinking, what's out there? How much am I finding? Play around with some different questions and see how much you're finding. So those are the kind of things. Don't get too, when I say don't commit, I really mean, you don't want to force yourself into a box. You want to give yourself a chance to take a look and really see what's going to motivate you. That's what I would say. And of course, the end thing is to choose something that really interests you. You want to live with that topic, and usually with a larger lit review, you're living with it for quite a while. And you want it to still drive you until the end of the project, which could be more than a year sometimes, or more than 2 years. If you're writing a book, it could be a long time, so I think you get the point. So what are you trying to find out? These questions, you don't need to jot them down, they're on the back of that page with the slides. So you're trying to find out what has been written about your topic, that's a no-brainer, but you also want to find out what hasn't been written about your topic. So that's the other flip side. Who are the key contributors to the discussion? What are the prevailing theories and hypotheses? What questions are being asked? And the flip side of that is what questions are not being asked. What are appropriate and useful methods and methodology? What gaps are you finding in the discussion, and why it's important? Are you finding areas that warrant further investigation? Are there controversies? This is a nice little list of things that you should be thinking about and addressing as you're writing. So these are the things that are going to drive you to find more or to look for additional information if you're not finding something you were thinking you were going to find. But those are the kinds of things that you're answering as you're writing as you're researching and writing your lit review. There are many more questions, but I figured I'd just give you a bunch. Now, in terms of the building blocks for reviewing the literature, as a librarian, I'm willing to take a clue from anywhere. So I'm not picky about that. And I think that anytime you're researching, you should just be willing to take a clue to get you to move to something else at any time. Don't be, worried about, is it scholarly? It could be an article, you're sitting around just watching the news and they talk about some project that's being done at a university and you haven't seen a thing on it, but now you know what university's working on it, and if it has to do with your topic, that's a clue. And to me, I'm willing to take every clue. It could be in People magazine, I don't care. As long as it's getting me somewhere else, I'm happy. Now in the end, the lit review probably won't include that clue, but hopefully it will take you to something that will pan out for your work, for your research. So most of the time we're talking about books and book chapters that are scholarly in nature, peer-reviewed journal articles. They could be the writings that people do from an annual meeting or a convention, conference proceedings. Many of these are scholarly in nature, and of course thesis and dissertations. But I would not discount other kinds of writing depending on your subject area and your topic, obviously. A newspaper article could be an important element depending on what you're working on. Historical records, government reports. Government reports, there are countless, I literally countless scholarly government reports. So it's, in the US government, I think is the largest publisher in the world. So we're talking a lot of material out there. And not all of them are found in the same databases. So one of the things I think is important to remember that if you are researching and using the usual databases and you're not finding some of these formats that you're thinking, I may be able to find a very good product, in something else, talk to a librarian who can guide you to a database that may include that kind of format where you're not finding it in your subject database. So it's important to do that. And of course, sometimes you will get clues as you're reading that will talk about a report or a piece of legislation or something that is significant, and then you can ask for help to find them. Because again, they may not be in the usual places we even recommend that you look in. So just ask someone for help and they'll help you as much as possible. We really go to the mat for you guys because sometimes you need something and we try hard to make sure that you can find it. Usually what you're using are bibliographies, are one form of how to find the information. And I'm sure you're all used to using the bibliography at the end of a journal article. But how many of you have ever used a book that's a bibliography? There really are whole books that are bibliographies to topics. It used to be a very common way that people would publish on a subject area, but when the internet started to come in, it started to go out of style. But it's being revised. I think they realize that the internet is so huge that it's very hard to get your hands around a topic and keep sort of an organized look of the literature. So even though the published bibliographies started to go away, and you'll find many that have older dates. I don't mean older like the 19th century, but we will find bibliographies probably into the beginning of the 21st century, but they kind of stopped. They're not doing as many, but now they're starting up again. More commonly, you're going to use databases, but be aware that if you find a book that is a bibliography, take a look, and they will organize it in a certain way that you can utilize it. Terminology, a big important thing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the things I want you to jot down and keep track of. And one of the pieces to that puzzle is definitely the terminology. I think it's a good idea to have either. I mean, it's nice. Some people like to have something printed that they can write on and write longhand. Other people are always online. You may start a little document on your computer and you start keeping track of the terms that you're using. And I'm going to show you a way that some people keep track of that kind of stuff. But make sure that you keep track of those terms because you're going to want to repeat them in other searches and you're going to want to vary them a little bit. So having notes that say what you did is very important. So start out with a search strategy that you've written down, and you can use it usually in more than one database, so it's very important to remember that. The last piece on this slide is about noting the complete bibliographic information. And I'm going to talk a little more about that as we go further into the talk today, because I want to talk about keeping some type of citation manager as a place where you can maintain your collection of resources. So we'll talk a little more about that later. Now, in terms of documenting your searches, I was just saying to you, you could do it in longhand, you could do it on a computer, whatever you want to do. But these are some of the things that you might want to keep track of. It's almost like a little bit of a journal or diary of your progress. So every time you sit down and you go into a database, jot down the name of the database. I know that the vendor, in this case the host, is ProQuest. I have Eric for the database, which is an education database. The host is ProQuest. Knowing which one it is will be helpful to you because I'm going to talk about some things you can do within databases, and knowing which one you used will help you to go back and find something you did already. So I want you to remember that. The date, that's really to give you sort of something to go back to. In terms of the years, most of the time when we go into a database, we search all the years. But you may have some aspects of your topic that will require you to restrict to certain years, so be aware of that. We're going to talk about using saved search, which is a way to keep your search record of it in the database. You can go back and do it again without having to do all that typing all over again. And make a note. Did you limit it by language? Did you limit by peer review or scholarly? So those are the things you want to know so you can go back to find some results again or play with it. What your retrieval was, whether you exported to RefWorks or EndNote or whatever you're using, but kind of keep a little diary. And one of the reasons why is that, well, in some subject areas, and I don't know if the disciplines you're in require this, but in some areas, when you're actually doing the lit review, you might be asked to include your search strategy. And so I've read that in lit reviews myself, and I know that in my field some people do this, is they're putting the search strategy that was used, and then someone can go and try the same thing. So that's one of the reasons you definitely want to keep track of that. Yes?
Question in this part, it's really very important. Actually, some professors, they ask you to do the same things. tell me the method, how you did it.
Yes.
And some professors, they will not ask you, but I'm worried. Should I include it all the time or no?
Well, and that's a loaded question, because I think that if you don't include it, then someone who really wanted it would not have it. If you're doing something for a professor, then do what they want. I mean, I know that sounds so general, but it is the rule of law, isn't it? Do what that professor wants. If it's for a thesis or dissertation, and you have an advisor, you have a committee, you want to make sure that they tell you what they expect. So I would do it for my own needs, and if it's part of the way the publication should be written, yes.
I'll include it.
Yeah. I don't know if you've read many lit reviews over the years, but some cases you may have seen it where they do that, and in other cases not. So I don't think it's something that, I know it's not used in every discipline, and so I would definitely speak to someone you respect. If you have lots of people to choose from, I would choose someone that you respect and follow that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So one of my search techniques that I think is both interesting, it's fun, and also it's fun. I'm a researcher, what can I tell you? I think it's fun. But it's also, it works out to be one of the best techniques for lit reviews, because right off the bat it helps you look at the literature in a different way. And it's called citation searching or citation mining. People call it a few different things. And basically it points out all the linkages that you see in the papers that you're finding and you're searching. So what I would recommend is, as you're doing some preliminary searching and you're reading articles, pick one that you consider an exemplar, which would mean one that's really good, or it could be a seminal article in the field that you know about already, and your goal is to track the impact. So when you look at it and you see the works that the author cites, that's you're looking backwards on this topic. So you're getting a view into the background and the history of the topic. And then you see who influenced that author, and you can see who they cite. Now, then when you look for articles that cite this exemplar article or seminal article, you're looking forward on that topic. You're seeing who was influenced by that important article and who cited it. So if you're a visual learner, you may decide to create some kind of visual pictures of the articles you're finding and who's talking about who and this and that, because that's really the picture you're trying to paint in your lit review, and analyzing who is talking about what and their effect on each other. So that's the part that is so interesting. Now you also find, as you're doing this, sometimes you're finding interdisciplinary things, which can be fun. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the issues when you start doing interdisciplinary, but it's also, to me, one of the exciting things to see when someone is writing about an exemplary article in a different way, and you may be able to pull in some of their thoughts into something that you're doing. And so it's something that's interesting as you're doing the research and finding out who is looking at common authors. So I'm going to do a sample search, and let's walk through this together. So I'm on the library homepage, and I'm going to go to the A to Z list. You can go to A to Z from here or from Research Start. Either way, there's a list for A to Z databases. And for those of you who haven't worked with the new system, you can just go to A to Z right here. If you know a subject area, you can click here and pick the subject area, and we break out the best bets in that topic area, and then the other databases that look at it. So in my case, I'm doing something that is either international relations or political science, and so I could go like that. And right off the bat, it gives me the best bet databases, and then A to Z of other ones that could be relevant. Okay? So I'm choosing worldwide political science abstracts. And my topic is transitional justice. So before I go too far in this area, does anyone know what transitional justice is? Okay. Transitional justice, I think this will make sense because the way it's expressed. You know, when you see a situation in a country where civil war breaks the country apart, there are all kinds of things that are torn apart, and the justice system and the whole government has to be rebuilt. And I think we could all name some, but I'll pick one. South Africa, Bosnia, Herzegovina, when all of these things took place in those countries, they had to go look at how do we rebuild, how do we make something whole again. And so there are all these different things that they go through to come up with a during that transitional period. So I'm gonna look for that. And we're not gonna have a lesson on transitional justice, but I wanted to. It's an area that has always interested me, and for some reason I meet people from these countries all the time. Not those two, any country that's fallen apart, I kind of meet them. So transitional justice. Now, I would say to you, if you know, at the beginning I said start with a broad topic. So this is a perfect example. This is a broad topic. I haven't focused in, I'm just gonna go search. Yes?
Is there any particular reason that you put the search term in quotes as opposed to not putting it in quotes?
Yeah, there is. Thanks for asking. Does anyone know why I did that? That's called phrase searching. So if I put in transitional justice, the database would put an and in between the two words. It would look for transitional anywhere in the record and justice anywhere in the record. But I want to force it. I want it to find them next to each other. And you can use that on Google. It will force the words next to each other. It will get rid of a lot of baloney that you really didn't want to look at. If you want that phrase to be in your result, that's the way to do it. In the databases, it's even more powerful because we don't have the millions of sites that Google pulls up. So you know that when you're on Google, you get diminishing returns as you go page by page. But when you're in a database like this, all of our results, the 2,628 items, will have the phrase transitional justice in the title or the abstract, something like that.
And
So-
it would be together all the time.
In
all
my
the
results,
articles.
yes, in my results, yes. So when you're in your field, you know there are phrases you use all the time. It's so nice to get rid of all the baloney you didn't want to read. So this is a good technique.
Thanks.
And it works almost everywhere. You know, if the database doesn't want it, it will tell you, it'll say something. And then just get in touch with one of us and we'll try and help you find a way to do it in that database. So anyway, I found these, and if I was doing what I told you to do at the beginning, I would look at the titles, I would get a look at what they're about, I would go to a preview and kind of see what the abstract said, I would look at some of the terminology in the subjects. The terminology in the subjects in the databases that we purchase for you, it's important to know that humans look at these items, not a robot. Humans look at them and they say, oh, I'm going to put this heading on here because this article has enough about this topic that a researcher would be interested, okay? So when you look at the subjects, you get a good feeling about how much of the article really deals with a certain aspect. So I think it's helpful, and also saves you time from reading 5 million articles that just mention the word that you had in mind. So as I'm going down, I want to point out a couple of things. Let me go back up here. Now, right off the bat, I don't see anything here. Obviously, we see PDFs. Some articles are going to be in full text in some of these databases, and I'm not going into a whole lesson on searching databases today. I really have a very specific thing to look for. But remember earlier I was saying to you that sometimes you're not sure of how large the reference list should be in a dissertation or a thesis. I see here from this thing that I'm looking at a thesis or a dissertation, and we can see this person had 71 references in it. You know, so you see right away. I notice in poli-sci that some of them have like hundreds of citations.
You're talking about 71 person references in whole dissertation, 5 chapters, or just only 1 chapter?
In that whole dissertation or thesis. Yeah, so some databases include that, some don't. So it depends what you're working with, and we'll be looking at a few different things today, but because I want to show you sort of a pattern. But that's a helpful tip if you see that. Because we were talking about how you just never know what's enough. And that's why, your advisor, as we were talking before, your advisor is very important because they're going to give you more minimums than maximums. If you're starting to get too many, they will start saying to you, come on, hold on. Because what happens with graduate students all the time, and I've watched this personally with people I've been working with, is if you're excited about your topic, you start finding things on all aspects of this topic, and really you need to focus. And so at some point you have to divorce yourself from all these other things, and usually the professors will say, that's the next book. Let's work on this one first, and you sort of find that area that's where you should be focusing. So, we see some different things. I see an article here, and this is an article, I don't believe it's a dissertation, with 131. So it just depends on the topic. And so, anyway, we're seeing some different things. We're seeing that this database is including that something is cited by a certain number of journals in this database. So this article that we're looking at has been cited by 3 other articles in the database. Cited by is what our aim is to find cited by. So I actually chose one that's a little lower down on the page, I think. It's called The Irreconcilable Goals of Transitional Justice. So as I come down here, there we are. So here's what. This is one I've been tracking for a few years, so I keep going with it because I'm curious to see if it's getting more sightings. So it's been cited 45 times. What's nice about this database, and if your database is in your subject area, do this. This is something you're thinking, yes, it's helping me, because you want help. So I'm going to click on this, cited by, and it's going to show me the 45 articles that cite that article. So remember what I was just saying. The article itself has a reference list that tells you what they were influenced by. That's looking back. But being able to see who cites an article that you think is important is moving the topic forward, and it's showing how they're influencing the literature moving forward. So, for example, what I was saying to you may be keeping a journal, you may be keeping kind of a visual representation of what you're finding. You're basically trying to see who's talking about what, and what are the things that lots of people are talking about, because is there something special about it? Be aware that just because something is cited doesn't mean it's on positive reasons that it's cited. It could be a negative reason it's cited. So, you're the one who's going to figure that out. But it's important. And so what's nice about this is it gives you a look at a bunch of things in this database. This is the Worldwide Political Science Abstracts. I would say it's like the #1 political science database. So to go in here, you're looking at a lot of the literature that your colleagues are using and what they're publishing in. So it's a good place. And there are other places we could look as well, but I would say to someone start here if that was their field. Okay? So you see one example. Yes?
For example, if tomorrow I cite something from this article, how they will calculate me that I cited this one? How they know?
Well, if you publish your article or your thesis, it's going to be in digital format. And so when they will have some sort of reader that will keep track of all of the references. And so that's how, like for example, you noticed how we were going through before. This page, I don't know if it shows it, but the page before, I was showing you when it said things like references. For some reason, something about some of these had the references visible. So they were able to say, oh, there were this many references. It just depends. I think what we're seeing out there in the world of publishing is more and more of that additional information is being made available. So, you're doing your research now, so you're interested in what you can get your hands on now. But you'll begin to see, and if you stay in academia, you'll begin to see this evolution. And so that's one of the things that you will be able to find. Some databases, when you search them, and you may not even be aware of this, when you're searching some databases, they are actually, some look at the full text of the item. And there's one database that I search sometimes called PsycInfo. When you do a search on there, sometimes you get an article because of what's in the reference list, and they include the reference list right there in the database. So when I say to you guys, oh, look at the subject headings, look at this, sometimes the title has nothing about the topic you wanted, the abstract has nothing, but right there in the reference list, something is about your topic. Sometimes that's useful to you, other times it's just sending you astray, and you're like, oh, wasn't looking for that. When you're doing a lit review, you wouldn't mind something that sends you sort of like in another direction, maybe you'd find something special, but, yeah. So some of them show it, some of them don't. Okay, so here we have one that we have the article, we have the list of things that are citing it in this database. Okay, so let's go another step. Normally I would take you to another regular library database, but I want to take you to Google Scholar. I know it's not a dirty word, it isn't a dirty, you can use Google Scholar for some things. I think when I talk about Google Scholar in the sense of doing searches for your research, I would say that it's okay to use it at the beginning. It's okay to use it at the end, but it isn't okay to use it for the whole thing. I mean, the middle has to be real databases, because Google Scholar doesn't get their hands on everything. You're missing a lot of stuff if you go there. It's okay, I mean, someday they may own the world, but right now they don't, and information is expensive, and so you have to try other places to find. And sometimes in Google Scholar, the site, you may have more than one thing cited a few times. It can be a little confusing. So I don't know if you're big Google Scholar users, but I do recommend it for certain things, and this is one of them. So let's say you find an article that is like a good one. You go into Google Scholar, put the title in quotes, and search. So right off the bat, it shows me that it was cited 315 times. I mean, the research we're doing for this is basically you're digging. You're trying to find the clues that I was talking about. So I'm fine with this. This gives us clues. It's telling us that 315 items cited this article right here in Google Scholar. So I'm going to click on this, open it in a new tab, because I want to go back and forth for a few things. So right off the bat, I have all different kinds of things in here. So you're thinking, yes, this is good. One thing that I love about this, the other database didn't allow us to do it. I could click and search within these citing articles. So I want to look at, is there anything on Bosnia in here? If they're talking about Bosnia, I want to see how they're applying, you know, maybe using my source. So I'm going to do Bosnia. Now it's telling me of the 315, 120 are discuss Bosnia at some point. So I'm happy, you know, I'm thinking this is good. Because let the database do the work for you. You shouldn't have to look through each of them and then realize, oh, they don't talk about Bosnia. You want something to be in there that has that word. And so that's one of the helpful things I think about if you're doing a lit review. This is one of the pieces of the process I would add. Because this way you're getting some clues about things that may relate to the important articles, not every article, the ones that count. See who's writing about it. What I also think, and this is a good and I won't say it's a bad thing, is this will also give you an interdisciplinary picture, whereas when you're in the database of your field, they're looking at the content that is the literature of your discipline, whereas this is going and looking at everything. So sometimes, as I said, it can be helpful, sometimes it can be a little difficult. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So what I love also about Google Scholar is they made a deal with a major database. And the place I was going to take you next would have been Web of Science. They made a deal with Web of Science. So rather than you having to go into Web of Science and run your search, right here when I have my article that I'm interested in, they have the Web of Science reference list here. So I can see the Web of Science had 109 items that cite my article. So right off the bat, I get a connection. They must have paid Web of Science for their data. It's not giving you the article, it's just giving you the data, and it was obviously worth it to them to do that. So there's 109. You'll notice it says 101 here, and that's because there's some databases that make up Web of Science, and there's probably some duplication. So once they pull out the duplicates, it becomes 101 sites. What I like also about Web of Science, they allow you to refine your results. So if I want to look at the ones that have Bosnia somewhere in them, I add that, and now I find that 7 out of all of those mention Bosnia. So that saves me a lot of time if that's really what I'm trying to do. And of course you can change it up, you can add whatever you need to narrow down your result. But you see where I'm going with this? It's kind of fun. I mean, it's sick fun, but it's fun. It's also interesting because you begin to see these connections. You're not thinking about that usually, but here you're thinking about it. It's something that you normally are not worrying about too much. So I enjoy that, and I think that you probably would enjoy doing that too. Any questions? I mean, really, when you go into the databases in your field, you're going to be looking for some things a little differently now. You're looking for things that say cited by and trying to make those connections. For a lot of different subject areas, we know Google Scholar is going to work for you. Once you've done your preliminary searching and you find things that look good, those articles that you're going to look at what you're basically going to do if the main databases in your field don't have a cited by feature, you're going to read things that look good to you. You're going to take a look at those bibliographies and those articles, and that's where you're going to start keying in on what they're citing, because you're going to try to see who's co-citing. How many people are picking the same article? As you're reading your articles, you're going to start to feel this connection without having a database do it for you, but it's nice when the databases help you. And so you also, when you figure out what you think are important articles, you'll go into Google Scholar, you'll look for it, it'll give you the places that have cited it. You'll go into Web of Science through Google Scholar, and you'll be able to see some others. Web of Science, for those of you who are not scientists, it does include other sciences like social sciences, it includes arts and humanities to some degree. Not as much, but it does include it, so don't push it aside. Most subject areas are included in there in some way, so I would recommend using it. Any questions about that? Okay. So we did the first one. We did some successful strategies. We did citation searching, citation mining. Footnote chasing, I mean, that's an obvious one. As you're reading and you're finding things that are discussed, you just take that and go with it, look for it. Author searching, you know, if you find an author that's writing about your topic, rather than just do a subject search, you could search on that author and see if they've written anything else on that subject. If they've written anything newer about that subject. So, you know, use what you've got to expand. You can use, when you do a search in a database, if you're curious to see are there any literature reviews on my topic, has someone already done one, that's a good thing to look for. And I'll tell you a couple of reasons why you want to do that. You can do it in the title field. When you're in a database, you can change the field that it searches in. We usually all search everywhere, but you just, there's usually a pull-down box, and you can just look in the title field. And if you put the word review or literature review in quotes, it will do that, it will look for it. The reason you might want to make sure is that you do not want to duplicate someone else's lit review. So you probably want to think about how to make a difference. If it's something quite a bit older, that's a different ballgame, because you're probably looking at the more recent stuff. But I would speak with an advisor if something seems very close to what you were thinking of doing. And of course, when you're reading your articles, now you have a few different questions you'll have in mind as you're reading, as opposed to just reading about the topic and the way it supports your subject. One thing I'd like you to do is to get to know your subject librarian. While I'm more than willing to meet with students of every subject area, I can certainly get you started on your searching. There's a subject librarian who is here at the library who works with with your field. They're collecting books for your field, they're working with different classes, maybe they haven't been to one of your classes, but all you have to do is go to find subject librarian, and all the subject librarians and the subject disciplines are listed here, and you can look for them. They do guides for different subject areas, and they're the ones that look at what databases should be in the best bets and this and that. So this is a way to find a subject librarian and to meet them. You know, we do consultations as a norm. When you have a quick little question, we don't need a consultation. You can use the ask thing here and even talk to us online. We were talking about this earlier today, that when the ask thing comes out, there's a librarian on the other side. One of us is there. You don't know who you're going to get because we take turns on there, but it's a librarian who's either from here or B-Bay, and we're answering your questions. And if you don't know who the subject librarian is, and if you ask a question that the person on right then doesn't feel comfortable answering because they just don't have the expertise, they'll guide you to the subject librarian. They'll tell you who it is and give you an email or a phone number. But some people thought there were robots on there, so I wanted to make sure that you guys know that real people, your librarians are here, not people from other places. So if you have questions, please, ask. We're very available. Yeah.
Do they offer one-to-one appointment?
When you want an appointment,
Yeah.
you can just email or call the person. And sometimes I think email is good because then we can give you directions to the office and all that stuff.
I mean, just for my area, I just need to make sure from my terms that it's good to put it in the database. I don't want to make a very big search, or I want to just save time. I want to make sure this is a correct thing.
You can email your subject librarian and say, I'm working on a paper on this and this, which are the best databases, where would you recommend I start? They'll probably ask you, where have you looked already, because they're curious. But give us a little information and then we'll give you something back. We don't need to meet with you, but if you want to meet, we're available for that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I had a meeting with some grad students. I have 3 of them who are working on a project. They're each working on a piece of a project. And so we met for over an hour today to try and navigate and strategize. Because sometimes it's just not that easy. You have a topic in mind and you're hoping there's something out there. Sometimes it's not there, and that was what was happening to us today. So that could be a reason you change your mind about what you're researching. You may feel that it's too hard. The topic you're picking may not really work for what you want to do. So that's where that preliminary searching is so important. So yeah, ask for help if you're not sure where to go. So when you're doing your research, you have to at some point ask yourself, have I done enough searching? So the questions you're asking yourself are, does the literature I found make a significant contribution to the understanding of the topic? Has my search been wide enough to ensure I found all the relevant material? And has it been narrow enough to exclude irrelevant material?
This is what I'm talking about. Because sometimes you have question, you thought, oh, I've done a great job on it. But if you give to your professor, she said, oh, there is something there. There is one study has been done by this one, and include it. So
well, sometimes what happens, you're dealing with an expert in your field and they're very widely read, so they know of something that just touches on exactly what you want. And it's funny how that happens, but if you're doing the kinds of techniques I'm talking about, where this writer is talking about that writer and this writer is talking about that writer, you're probably going to start narrowing down the important papers. And that's why playing around with that kind of technique is very helpful.
you mean technique for the terms, right? Searching terms.
Yes, the searching terms are going to make or break your search.
This is really something very important, and
That's why you want your librarian to help you.
Yes.
Hello. I know it sounds silly. We may not be experts and have master's degrees in your field, but we have master's degrees in interrogation. And that's how we get to we get you to actually give us what we need to help you. And to tell you the truth, today I was working with some students who work in something, as I said, is one of the areas I am a liaison for. But when the topic they picked was very unusual, and we went in, and I was looking I was looking at the titles, I was looking at the subject headings. We were trying to figure out how the databases talk about our subject, not how our words are. Sometimes we talk about something, but the way they're writing about it, they're not using those terms. And so if you can possibly figure out what the terminology of the database is, that's how you get to what you really wanted. And sometimes that is the key to improving a search, that you thought you did everything you could, but you have to manipulate it by using what the database is tagging those articles with, and sometimes that makes all the difference. So I highly recommend, if you're feeling like I'm not hitting on what I need, go see a reference librarian who can help you in your field. And if they need someone else, we talk to each other, and we all have learned how to do this sort of, a lot of it is logic related and terminology. I mean, you have to get to the right terminology. So just a word, because I want to start getting on a few other important little things you need to know about using the databases. If you find yourself in an interdisciplinary situation where you're doing a lit review that's bringing in the interdisciplinary, you are going to have to sort of think a little differently if you want to move on that other discipline, because remember, the way they describe things may be quite different to the way you do. So you could run into a terminology issue just by searching in a database from another subject area, and they will call it something different. They may use it for a different purpose, so you don't really know. So you're going to be dealing with different vocabularies, different academic culture. There may be variations, so be aware of that. And if you are in that situation, ask for some help. It's not, we don't do the research for you, but we do help people navigate, because there's so much out there. It's hard to keep up with everything, so we don't expect you to keep up with it. I mean, right now you have to learn how to use things now, but we'll be happy to give you a hand. So keeping track of searches and sources. When you're in the databases, and this is one of the things that you may not have used before, I don't know, there's something called save searches and search alerts. So I'm going to go back into one of them and show you what it looks like. So if I'm in here, let's go to my first one right here, and I have my articles from the first very broad search that I ran. If I want to send myself some things, I can do that by clicking on them. And then I have the ability to click this database will show me citations, and I can change the format if I want, and I can email these to myself. That's a nice thing. Most databases do that. I can email these references to myself. I can save them and send them to RefWorks, which I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes, or some other bibliographic manager. But I can also save my search. Now this search was not a great search, so I wouldn't, let me do something else. Let me do one more so I can show you a couple of things here. Let's say I was going to do, so let's say I ran that search. So now I have two searches I ran. So in the course of your search, like if you're in a search session, you can click on recent searches and it will show you what other searches you did. So you know how when you're being creative and you're changing your words up and you're doing lots of searches, all of them will be listed somewhere, and you can go back and click on it again and run that search again without having to type anything in. So that's helpful. You also have the ability, while you're in there, of saving your search. So if you decide to, this is a silly search, this is one maybe a little more complicated, but some searches can be very complicated. So if you save your search, it will ask you to open up an account. So you're opening up an account in, it's called My Research, no, what is it? This is like your folder. You can open up an account in ProQuest, this is ProQuest, And so any ProQuest databases you're using, when you run a search and you save it, they'll all be kept in this ProQuest place. And it will have the records that were from that search. You'll be able to go quickly and run the same search all over again. Sometimes that's useful, so some people like to save their searches. I prefer to send my results that I want to somewhere else, so that's why I want to talk about RefWorks a little bit. But what I also love about this is if you have a saved search, you have the ability to create an alert. So let's say you do that search that you're finally happy with, and this is where you got so many of your results, or more than one of them, doesn't have to be one. You can create an alert, and you ask the database to check every week or every month or whatever you want. Usually it'll do it for a year. You give it the parameters, and then you'll get an email if something new comes up that should have come up in your search, but it was just added to the database. That saves you time from having to go run searches again. So I did that one year as a check to see what it would do, and it really did that. And then at the end of the year, it sent me an email and said, your search alert is about to expire, do you want to continue? And it gives you the opportunity to continue. So I would say, when you're in the thick of a big lit review situation, I would do some search alerts, because once you have a good search that you think is really hitting what you needed, that's great. It means that you don't have to think about going in and running some new searches. As the months go on and on and on, you'd rather that database is looking for you, and it's going to tell you what's come out in your field. So I think that's very helpful. So search alerts are cool, and I would highly recommend using them. Any questions about that? The other thing is table of contents alerts. Some journals will do a table of contents alert for you. So let's say there's a journal that you know you like a lot. You don't subscribe because it costs a gazillion dollars, but you like it and we have access to it. Sometimes we don't even have access to it, but a lot of the journals will send you a contents alert. So when a new edition, of that journal, whether it's a monthly or quarterly, they will send you the table of contents. And so this way, right off the bat, you get to look at what came out, the most recent articles. And you're probably not thinking about that too much, but as a professional, I have those kinds of things all the time. I don't have time to go looking. I need them to come to me. And so that's why you do that. It's like the way a listserv is if you get on a listserv. So you can do that with table of contents alerts as well. Any questions? So last but not least, one of the last but not least, I have one more slide after this, I think, is the citation managers. Are anybody in this room using RefWorks? Okay, anybody using EndNote? Anyone using Zotero? Mendeley? Okay, you see how everybody has like little, sometimes a professor says, use this. And of course, when a professor says that, you kind of have to use it. But some professors don't have preferences. They're willing to let you use whatever you want. We have been doing RefWorks workshops for many years, and due to popular demand, we're working with our med school colleagues, and we started working with EndNote and teaching that this year. So we have a couple of workshops coming up next week, exactly this time, same day, same time, in a different room. We'll be downstairs in the 280 lab that has computers around, so you can sit at a computer while you're working. We have a session for RefWorks, and then the following week we have EndNote. I always run them right after the lit review classes so people can give them a try. If you're not sure which one will work the best for you, don't hesitate to come to both of them. I know time is it's hard for you to spend so much time, but it's worth it to make the decision. Some of us are more comfortable with RefWorks. I myself am learning EndNote now, so although I probably could help somebody a little bit, I don't consider myself an expert at EndNote, but I've been working with RefWorks for a huge amount of years, so I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, so there's a built-in manager in Word where you can make your own. Is there any particular reason that we use one of these as opposed to the one built into Word?
Well, I can think of one reason. If you're a grad student, when you graduate, you lose all of your access to FIU databases. But you keep your RefWorks account.
Okay.
That will continue. And one of the things that's nice about these accounts is you can attach the PDFs to the article citations that are in there. And so your articles, your citation PDFs, the PDFs will be right in there. You're going to put them in. So you'll still have that. I mean, to some people that matters. To other people, they don't care. But that's one of the nice things about that. And so you'll still have access to it. RefWorks is different than EndNote in that RefWorks is a web-based product, and so any computer you go to, you can open it up. EndNote is different. EndNote, you do have to, they have a great price for grad students. It's only $20, so you can't beat that because the price over the counter, I think, is five or more times more expensive than that. But when we do the class, we talk about it, and then you can make the decision to go and from UTS, they either send you something or give you a disk or something to put it on your computer. So it's a little different in how it works, and the librarians who train those classes will explain everything. I can explain some of it, but let me just at least show those people who have never used it what happens. Let's go back. So if I have my 3 items, so it's this easy, and I use it myself just for my own research. And I did use it for a chapter I was writing, and I thought, boy, this is great, because my whole graduate degree was on a typewriter, so I can appreciate this. So save here to RefWorks, but if you were saving it to some other format, there are other ways to do it, like RAS. It just depends what that particular product requires. So here's the 6 items. I guess I hit 6. Continue. Let's see if it's going to work. We've had some problems this week. Okay, so this is the new RefWorks. This is the one I would recommend. If you're a legacy user, if you already have an old account, many people are moving them over. Some people love legacy and they don't want to move over, but we recommend that you move over because at some point they're going to force you to do it. If you're going to open up a RefWorks account, you can do it if you want to come to class next week, but do it from an FIU computer on campus. So it sees the IP, and make sure that you use your email account, because that's what they require. So here, that quickly, the 6 documents are in here, and they just show up right away. So we have all 6 here. And I can click these, and as you're doing it, see it says a few seconds ago, if you're sitting and just sending things, you'll see as they keep coming. They hold on to I think for 30 days, so you can see what you've done for 30 days. But everybody's different. I always click on what I found and I assign it to a folder, usually right away, out of habit. So you create your own folders, and if you need to create a new folder, you can do that. I have a transitional justice folder, so right off the bat, I put the 6 in there, and you can see how it's showing you. Now, every record can be in more than one folder. You don't have to only use one folder.
You've only exported the citations, not the documents.
Exactly. That's one of the things that people are like, well, EndNote does the looking for you, and that is one of the features of EndNote that's kind of fabulous, but I'm still not a complete convert, even though I'm going to teach it, but I can see the positives and the negatives to both of them. So you're right. You have to add the PDF, and usually the PDF you can do a drag and drop right off into these documents, and we go into all of that in the class. But it's so quick and easy, and I promise you, whatever citation manager you use, it will not be perfect, because the metadata is only as good as what comes in. And we see this even from very reputable databases, it varies. And so sometimes you'll be missing a piece of a citation, but as you do this kind of work, certainly working on a lit review or a thesis dissertation, you will know how to do a proper citation, like your eye will fall on it right away, because you begin to see things done the proper way. So you're going to get very good at it if you're not already.
You said about the PDF, you will take it and put it here, how can I take the PDF and put it in the report?
Well, like, I'll just give you one example. Let's say I click on this one, it comes up on the side here, and then I have the edit, okay? So when I come down here, I have a choice. I can add it as an attachment, which if I have it on my computer, very often that's what I do. But you can also drag and drop the article, and when it's like this, you just drag it onto here, and it just starts seeing it, and it processes the metadata from it. So it's like drag and drop, and it does it.
I've heard that RefWork is combined with Word documents. I don't know how.
To some degree it might be, but they're not the same. Word, like when you use this one, for example, when you use all of them, they usually have an interface with other word processing programs. So like there's something in here that works with Google Docs and with Word, whether you're a Mac or a PC user. So we talk about how to do that, and as you're writing, it will put, you put something in, and it will put the parenthetical reference, and then it will start your bibliography as you're writing. So that's, I mean, those are beautiful. I mean, that's probably what's happening with your Word when you're in Word. What's nice about these, and why I feel like if you decide to use something and then you're thinking, oh, I'd rather use this other thing, most of these programs allow you to download the records and upload them to another product. So, you know, if you're using RefWorks and you're just not convinced that you like it, you can download the records and upload it into EndNote. They have, you know, it's either an RIS or a BibTeX format, and it will very easily move around. And those of you who are, because you're grad students, you probably have heard of ORCID accounts. Have you heard of ORCID? Getting an ORCID ID? Well, if you're going to publish, an ORCID ID is something that you're going to begin to see the publishers asking you to create an ORCID ID. And it's something that, I'm just going to do this quickly, it's something that identifies you as you. And the reason I say that is there are a lot of people that have the same name. And so when you have an ID, you should be putting the ORCID ID on your publications, and then they can see that you are that person. People who come from cultures where there are a lot of very similar names, and there can be hundreds of people, thousands of people with the same name. Having your ORCID ID proves that it's your publication versus this other person who has the same name. And so it really started because of some of these problems where people were mistaking one person for another person. And so ORCID is now being asked for by publishers. So when you go in to to publish, they'll ask you to create an ORCID ID. And when you do your dissertation, to put it in our digital commons, they will ask you to open an ORCID ID. So I do sometimes some promo on ORCID IDs, so if you see something, you can do it in less than 30 seconds, create your ORCID ID. So think about that at some point. It will come in handy down the line if you don't use it right now. But there are ways to put your publications into ORCID and then send them to other things. And that's why people are doing a lot of sending records from here to there. And yes?
It's kind of a particular question that might be better for that other workshop, but with this, like say I do something like this, add all the PDFs. Is there a way that I can then export this and the PDFs to basically create my own, like if I need be offline archive of like everything?
I don't think so, because when you download it, you're downloading it in a format that doesn't look like a citation.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If you download it as a bibliography, it looks like a citation, but I'm thinking probably not.
Okay.
I don't know. You know, but they all have similar functionality. So I think that even though it's a bit long-winded to say this, if you're not using a citation manager, find one that you can use, because it's not fun to have all your citations in your email, and that's where you're copying and pasting and trying to keep track. That's a nightmare. And even if you want to do a lot of things manually yourself, it's better to have the shortcut of the citation manager. It will save you a lot of time, even with all the problems of a citation manager, I promise you. It cannot take you as much time as doing it totally manually, so I highly recommend that. So some last things, borrowing from other libraries. As you're doing your research, please order things from other places if we don't own them. We do this for free. There's no reason not to do it. When it's articles, they come to you from 1 to 3 days. You have the PDF in your Iliad account. Go in there and get it, and then download it to your own computer, because it will only stay in our Interlibrary loan folder for 30 days. UBorrow is similar. It's a way for you to get books from other state universities, and you kind of take care of it on your own. It's faster than Iliad, actually, so if you see a UBorrow opportunity, take it. Intercampus loan, if it's at the other campus, we'll bring it here for you. Depending on your subject, special collections could come into play. And if you're in the catalog and you see things from Center for Research Libraries in your field, Center for Research Libraries is sort of a consortial thing where research libraries all over the country belong to them. We all have an account, and they put together sources that no one could afford to do on their own. So then they're doing more and more digitally, but a lot of things are on microfilm or microfiche. We do have microfiche readers and microfilm readers. You can freely print, and you can save, to your computer, scanning. So it's much more convenient than it used to be. But these are things you can't get in other ways. So if you see them, inquire about it, and they will send the materials here if it's not digitized already. And of course, this is why I want you to meet your librarian at some point or touch bases with them. You can always ask questions from the Ask Us page on the Ask Us thing on the desktop, and make individual consultations with librarians. Through the process, you can meet with us different times, so don't feel like you can only call us once for help. You can stay in touch. Any questions? So, again, my name is Stephanie Brennanson. My email, I have a grad studies page that includes all the workshops for each semester, so you can take a look at those if you don't have it already. And